Hello, and welcome to our Empower panel. What do job descriptions have to do with federal reclassification? If you would be so kind and just let us know in the chat that you're hearing me okay. And we do have a couple second lag, so I can kill some time here. But just let us know that you can hear us good, and we will get started right away. This is a very important topic, near and dear to all of our hearts. Okay, great, you can hear us. I will do a quick introduction of myself, and then I'll have my panelists introduce themselves, and then we'll get started right away. Just to put out there first, we are not lawyers. We do not play lawyers on TV. We are representing ourselves. We are each experts in this area through the work that we do in 911 and the length of time that we have been doing it. So, hi, I'm Sara Weston. I'm the Executive Director of 911 Wonder Woman. I am also a consultant for 911 technology, and I've been doing that for the past 20 years. Laurie.
Hi, everyone. Laurie Flaherty here. For about 20 years, I was the coordinator of 911.gov, the National 911 program. I retired from federal service about 2.5 years ago. Ty.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ty Wooten. I'm the Director of Government and External Affairs for the International Academies of Emergency Dispatch.
And Ty's just getting started in his career.
Yes, so sorry. I forgot about how many years I was doing this. It's been 30, and it feels like yesterday.
Oh, well, that's good.
I've got another at least hour in me.
That's all we're asking. That's all we're asking today. Okay, before we get started, we just wanted to let you know that we are going to be doing a part 2 of the presentation. So this one is about educating you on what's going on and what you can do. The next one, we are going to be working with IAD to dive a little deeper on what we talk about today. So we're going to let you know what to do, and next time we're going to walk you through how to do it. So you can sign up for that now. It is Wednesday, July 31st at 2 o'clock Eastern time. And we will put this up here at the end of the presentation as well with a link to register. Okay, so what are we going to be talking about today? A lot has happened in the recent couple of weeks as it relates to reclassification on a federal level. So we are going to talk about the difference between facts and opinions in what's going on. So you'll be able to tell the difference. That'll be kind of a theme as we move forward. And then we're going to talk about the BLS SOC. We'll tell you about that organization and what they do and what that means. And then we will talk to you a little bit about the reclassification toolkit. And that's the part we're going to dive deeper in part 2 in a couple of weeks. And then the 911 Saves Act. There's been a recent update as of last week to the 911 Saves Act. So we'll talk about exactly what that is and what that means to you, as well as next steps. Before we get started, just want to plug our organization, 911 Wonder Women. If this is your first experience with us, welcome. If not, also welcome. Thanks for joining us. We do virtual education a lot, at least once a quarter, if not more. So our very next virtual workshop is actually happening next week. So I wanted to put in a quick plug for it. It is Thursday, the 25th from 11:30 to about 4:30. And you can register here. I put the QR code up there. But it is going to talk about career and dispatch. And I think it's really relevant to what we're talking about today, which essentially is professionalizing what we do in 911 even further. So please join us for that if you can. Okay, first up, I was inspired when my 5-year-old came home from kindergarten, and I got an email from his teacher that said, oh, this week in class we learned about facts versus opinions. And so I was like, I wonder what he's going to say, because you just never know with my 5-year-old. Well, he's 6 now. But anyway, so I wanted to share a bit of his wisdom with you. So I asked him, Anthony, what is the difference between a fact and an opinion? And he said, a fact is something you can prove, like bats are nocturnal. That you can prove. An opinion is something like, I like swimming. You can't prove I like swimming. That's just my opinion. So as we go through this today, we're going to keep coming back to what is a nocturnal bat and what is your preference for swimming, and hopefully break things down a little bit further from there. Okay, and with that, we're going to do a little education section on the Bureau of Labor and Statistics. I will throw it over to you, Laurie.
Thanks, Sarah. So on that theme, if we were trying to prove that telecommunicators are not clerical, we would have to provide information that would prove that. That would be a fact. My firm belief is that all telecommunicators should be other than clerical, but that's just my opinion. And this is all about providing facts, providing proof that will allow the Bureau of Labor Statistics to reclassify telecommunicators. If we went to your 911 center, I have a feeling that it would be obvious pretty quickly that the telecommunicators that work there are not clerical. But how would we prove that for all 5,000 or 6,000 911 centers in the United States? Obviously, you can't go to all of them. So maybe the answer lies in the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So let's talk about that a little bit. The Bureau of Labor Statistics is pretty much what it sounds like. It's a bureau within the Department of Labor that deals with statistics. Now, the United States has collected occupational data since like the 1850s. That's the first census when occupational data was really, we started collecting that. But the BLS SOC was really not established until 1977. And up to that point, there were a number of different databases out there. They were all slightly different in terms of how they categorized occupations and what criteria they used. And it sort of created an apples versus oranges kind of situation. You know, the data were not comparable. It was hard for people to know which one was the most accurate, how to compare them against each other, all that kind of stuff. So if we talk about sort of the Bureau of Labor Statistics and the SOC, maybe we'll provide a little bit of clarity to you in terms of what that system does. So next slide. So the Bureau of Labor Statistics is, again, pretty much what it sounds like. It's a bureau within the Department of Labor, and the Standard Occupational Classification System is a database. It's a database that's housed within the BLS that manages a data system to classify workers into occupational categories. There are thousands of occupations, as you can imagine. They all fall into one of 867 detailed occupational classifications. Next slide. Why was it created? As I said before, there was really a need in this country to have universal information available or consistent data with regard to occupations so that we could begin to compare apples with apples. And I'm not going to go over sort of like the use for all of that data, but you can see it here, all the types of people that were really interested in having such a database. And so in 1977, the BLS SOC was designed to cover all occupations, and the definition is on there, for which work is performed for pay or profit, and also reflects the current occupational structure of the United States. So next slide. So what are those classifications based on? Well, after the 2018 manual was published, I went to them and I asked, because I was a federal employee, and I went to the other federal agency, and I asked them what they based the occupational classifications on, and they told me the following: that it's based on the work performed, and in some cases on the skills, the education, and the training needed to perform the work that you described. So essentially what it comes down to are three things: job descriptions, documentation of the technology that is used in that job, and what kind of training is required or provided for that classification, and what kinds of certifications. And it is also based on objective information. Again, we're looking for nocturnal bats here. So we're the BLS SOC is based on data because they manage a database. So they are looking for data and information collected from us, from all of the occupations represented in that system. So going back to Anthony's, or excuse me, Sarah's son's description, again, we're looking for facts. So we're looking for data from the 911 community, and that is where the BLS SOC gets its information from. That's how they classify telecommunicators. Now, how often is it updated or revised? Well, as with any taxonomy, there were flaws and omissions in the original that was developed in 1977. And so the system was revised in 1980, and then again in 1990, and then not again till 2010. And the last revision was done in 2018. And as you can imagine, even the list of occupations evolved greatly over that period of time. And that's one of the reasons why they do this revision every 10 years or so. So it's done by a committee representing specialists from across US government agencies. And there are multiple opportunities for all of us, for the public, to provide input during that process. As you can imagine, collecting data on job descriptions, technologies used, training and certifications for all job classifications is an enormous task. That's part of the reason why they really only undertake it every 10 years or so. The most recent release, as I mentioned before, was published in 2018. And the process that they used to come up with that revision took about 4 years to complete. It included, a revision of the sort of the criteria, if you will, for which jobs are classified. They did a data collection, and then the publication of the manual. A couple of interesting factoids, from that 2018 manual, which I got from them. Number one, they randomly collect about 1,000 job descriptions from 911 centers, large and small, rural, urban. It has to be statistically random, and so they follow a very strict process for exactly which, how many and which ones they pull from. But they pulled 1,000 job descriptions from 911 centers, and the majority of those job descriptions describe the job as clerical. That's not on BLS. That's not on SOC. That's on us, because they got that information from us. Also, during the 2018 data collection, they told me they were inundated with "I like swimming." They were inundated with opinions. And I will read you, a statement, that they put out most recently in the Federal Register that says, information provided unrelated to the accurate gathering of information for statistical purposes, such as the perceived importance of workers in an occupation, do not influence the SOC Policy Committee recommendations. Similarly, the volume of comments does not impact recommendations either. So they've made it very clear from the get-go what kind of information they're looking for, and how they gather it. So what does that have to do with the our topic for today. Well, I'm going to turn it over to Sara and Ty to take it from here.
Awesome. Thank you, Laurie. We have what you just read in writing as well. So we'll look at that later. So there is a resource. Again, we will go over this in more detail in a couple of weeks, but in case you don't know, the reclassification toolkit is available on 911.gov, which is the easiest web address to remember, 911.gov. All you have to do, you can scan here the QR code, or you can go to 911.gov and put in the search reclassification. So there are kind of four chapters or additions, if you will, to the reclassification toolkit. We are going to focus most on job descriptions, training, certification, technology, and tools. And if you remember correctly, this is exactly what Laurie found in her research that they were looking for. So what we did as a team was we dove into each one and wrote a chapter for each one. I did some additional research right before NENA, because Ty and I did a presentation at the most recent NENA conference. So I Googled job descriptions, 911 job descriptions, just like I was as if I were a researcher for BLS. And these are just some of the things I found, guys. I mean, this was a couple weeks ago. So police dispatcher, clerical and technical generic job description. That was a template that people were using. As you can see in this job requirement, you need to use a typewriter. I mean, does anyone out there in the comments utilize a typewriter? This position title is clerical dispatcher. And this was updated in 2021, guys. And, you know, another thing that the BLS SOC found was that a lot of the job descriptions were like 30 years old, which in many cases was older than the people doing the job in the center. This one, nature of work, skilled clerical and public contact work. I mean, that's the first thing. This one, clerk slash dispatcher. I mean, you guys, this is from a Google search. You can probably do that as well, but it's really hard to expect the BLS SOC to not categorize 911 as clerical when we're putting this in our job descriptions. So if you do go into the reclassification toolkit, you'll find a couple of really useful graphics, among other things. So we're going to show you a couple of those. This one is all of the skills, knowledge, abilities that we could come up with as we were writing these documents. And as you can see, there are so many. And why not put them in your job descriptions, not only for the purpose of reclassification, but for the purpose of recruitment and letting people know the skills involved in this job. So you can see there are many. And the really great thing about everything on 911.gov is that it's not copyrighted. So you can take this chart if you wanted and put it into your job description, as with everything else.
If I could jump in there for a second, Sara, I think it's important when we talk about this. You mentioned recruitment, but I think potentially this is a larger issue that we are having across the 911 industry. And I brought this up at the NENA conference when we presented. I think it's important for us to understand that, if we aren't accurately reflecting the job it is that we're asking people to do in our job descriptions, then if the job description doesn't accurately reflect what we're wanting them to do, then we have people who are applying for a job. It's like we're doing a little bait and switch, right? We're having people apply for a job that's not actually what we're actually wanting them to do. And then when they're not successful, or they don't make it through process, or they don't make it through their, probationary period, and then we go, why is that? Well, is it because we're not reflecting the work that we're actually asking them to do in the job description. So I think in a lot of ways, many of us are facing, you know, continual turnover in our centers. Is potentially some of that turnover is because we're not doing what we need to be doing, what we're supposed to be doing in regards to reflecting the actual work that's being done in the centers, in the job descriptions. So we, one, recruit the people who have the skills, knowledge, and abilities that we're looking for, and two, that we actually reflect what it is we're asking them to do so that when they get into the center, it's not like, surprise, I know we told you this over here, but we actually want you to do all this stuff over there. So that, can have an impact on our ability to get this work done. Not only, I see this as a huge issue for reclassification, right? Obviously, I've been an advocate for this for many, many years about trying to get reclassified. There's a potential, many things that could spawn progress and things if that were to be done in the future. But I think really the biggest thing that I see in the short term is not even the reclassification, but the realization of updating our job descriptions can help us to recruit and retain our employees better.
Agreed. And that goes across the board for everything we're talking about today. It's not only good for reclassification, but it's good for 911, elevating 911 as a profession.
Right.
Okay, here's some action items. Again, we will go into this specific thing more in a couple of weeks because we want to save some time. We have some more important things to discuss. This is another chart. This is in the technology report. This is a snapshot in time, so it's already out of date, of all the different technologies that are used in a center. So this is another great tool just to realize everything that you do in 911 and technologies is, again, as Laurie said, something that they're looking for.
I look at that graphic, and it just reminds me, in my mind's eye, it's like every one of those boxes is just a monitor on your console. And I know it's not quite that bad, but that's what it makes me think of. And I think whoever designed that graphic, maybe unintentionally or maybe intentionally, was what it kind of meant to be. But in many centers, many of you have 6, 8, 10 monitors that you're looking at with all of the different technologies and tools at your fingertips, and we've got to make sure that those are part and parcel to the discussion. And that comes not only through the job descriptions and making sure that those things are up to date, but we have proper policies within our organizations that reflect the technology that we're using as well. And I think it's a two-part factor. We've got to make sure that we're discussing the technology issues in the job descriptions, but we have to follow that up and also emphasize it and make sure that we're utilizing that in our policies and procedures inside the organizations.
Speaking of policy and procedures, this document also helps to kind of give examples and outline policy, procedure, protocol, and guideline for writing SOPs or updating SOPs or describing the technology to the best of your ability, because we know sometimes that can get a bit technical, for lack of a better word. Oh my God. So I'm reading only had 2 monitors at each workstation when I started in 96. Now there are 6 and the team's wanting 2 more. Yep, that doesn't sound like clerical work to me.
Not so much.
Okay. I'm going to skip over this. We'll come back to it in a couple of weeks for now. Um, also, training is one of the aspects that Laurie was talking about. And Ty, I'll throw this slide to you.
Sure. I think this is one of those key issues, right? We talk about, I think, putting training and certifications, recertifications, maintenance of training and or certifications is an essential job function. So think of it this way: if you have requirements based on your state, region, locality in regards to you must have emergency medical dispatch training, or you have to have CPR training, or you have state basic telecommunicator training that is required, then those are all essential job functions for your telecommunicators to be able to do the work that they do. Without those certification and maintenance of those certifications, they are not eligible to do the work. So putting that in a job description is being able to obtain and maintain through continuing education requirements, a certification or a list of certifications is essential to the work. And it's also essential to your job description because, again, we want to make sure that we're reflecting not only the work that we're doing, but the requirements that that work forces us to have, right? So if we can talk about the amount of training that you have to have, we talk about the certifications that you have to have. This helps to elevate and raise the bar about the professionalism of what it is we do. And all of that is information that the BLS SOC can use as facts to make the determination that this is actually something besides an administrative or clerical position.
And again, we will dive further into
Yeah,
action.
yeah. I think we'll dive a little bit, but if you can go back, I think that we don't want to skip over this too much. I mean, it's really important for us to make sure that as each and every one of you who are on this or watching this live or the recorded version of it understand that this really comes down to you and the actions that each of you in your centers take over the next few months is critical to whether or not we are going to get reclassified. This is a fact. I mean, we know that the only way that the BLS is going to make a change is if we have a preponderance of that data that they look at that shows that we are actually doing the work that we're talking about. We have updated our job descriptions to accurately reflect the work that we're doing. We have updated the job descriptions to include the requirements on training and certifications. We have updated policies, and we've mentioned in job descriptions that reflect the technologies that are used today in the center. That's the stuff that's going to make a difference. And so we've got to make sure that you, and this is really what it comes down to, this is your call to action. If I could wave a wand and make this happen, it would have been done 8 years ago, 10 years ago, when this process began the last time. But I can't wave that wand and I can't magically make this work. So it takes time, it takes effort, and it's not the hardest job in the world, but it's not the easiest job in the world either. So we've got to be cognizant of it and just get the work started because that's what's going to make a difference.
Yes. And if you listen to what Ty was just describing when he was describing your job versus, well, we save lives and, we're the We're the link. And yeah, that's true. You are the link to the emergency responders. You do save lives. But what the BLS is looking for are what Ty just said. And you all know that's part of it. You all know your job. You know what it takes. They're looking for those facts. Last time they were inundated with stories on how lives were saved and how difficult the job is. And they understand that, I believe, but we need to infuse facts in there and give them what they need to make the decision that we want them to make. And it sounds different. Okay. Additionally, on 911.gov, there is a minimum training requirement document that you can look at. You can use that as a tool in your center. You can use it to update your documentation in preparation for the BLS doing its research. But this is a project that was originally published in 2016 and has now been is being revised. So it's a really great tool to go and use and help to educate yourself and actually find words. Sometimes the hardest part is like actually putting down into words what you're trying to say, and these documents are so great for that. There is a 4th edition of the Reclassification Toolkit, and it is an advocacy strategy. So I think that this is important to discuss. It talks a lot more about statewide reclassification, but I think it's a great document just in general that teaches you how to engage the proper people. Like, obviously, as 911, we need to be our biggest advocates, right? Because nobody knows what the job is like besides you, besides people who have sat there and done it. But we also need champions. We need movers and shakers. We need people with connections. We need people who have the time and resources to do this research and figure these things out. So this document is full of tips and ideas on how to do that, because we need each other in this. We cannot do this in a vacuum. Just on the point of state reclassification, this is the map from NENA's website of the states who have done that. And I forget, Laurie, what like the as of date is for this map, but it's just to look at progress across the country. I've always liked to think of reclassification as like a 3-prong approach. You have the state level, you have the BLS, and you have the 911 Saves Act, which we will talk about shortly. But all of these resources are here if you want to go check them out. Okay, I'm going to throw it back to Laurie to talk about the 911 Saves Act.
Well, and I'm going to look to Ty to do this with me. So okay. So fact. The 911 Saves Act is still out there. If it does not pass by the end of this calendar year, the bill dies again, and we have to start all over again. Now, if you're familiar with Schoolhouse Rock and the little How a Bill Becomes a Law, you know that there's a process it has to follow. It has to be in both the House of Representatives and in the Senate. It has to be discussed in committees, and then when the committee votes to send it to the floor for a vote, then both of those bodies send it to the floor for a vote, and then it either passes or it doesn't. So we know that the bill went, the most recent action of the House Committee on Education and Workforce voted to send an amended bill to the floor of the House of Representatives for a vote. That's where the 911 Saves Act is right now. So I guess the first question is, like, how likely is it to pass? Because this session of Congress ends in December. So we go to the next slide. I'm going to punt it to Ty to talk about that a little bit.
Well, if we're so first and foremost, I think I'm going to bring up a little statistic that Laurie mentioned yesterday. I happen to be in Washington, D.C., and that's where I'm doing this webinar from today. Laurie and I had lunch yesterday, and I believe she mentioned to me that on average, Congress in each session of Congress, which is a 2-year cycle, in past history, generally Congress has and approves 400-ish actions.
Yeah,
and
between
they're
300
2 years.
and 400.
Yeah, between 300 and 400. This Congress has approved 70 items in 2 years. So the 911 Saves Act, number one, I think is important for everybody to understand. It's one of the most bipartisan bills in Congress today. It has, on the House side, 130 plus co-sponsors, which is absolutely incredible. A companion bill that was introduced on the Senate side has a number of co-sponsors as well. And it's both are amazing that it is that well represented and has the legs of both parties, which is great. The problem is that, as you can see in this calendar that's on the screen, there's not many days left for this to actually get done. Before the November election, I think there's something like 15 or 18 days left in this before the election, because Congress is out the entire month of October campaigning. And then there's an opportunity for it to come back at the end. But I think, there's a couple different takes to all of this from my standpoint. And I don't know what's on the next slide. Maybe it's where we need to go, but I think that's the amended language. There's the massive amount of work that has been done by Congress in this session. The 118th Congress is not something that is massively getting in a lot of done. That's the understatement of the century. But if we look at the 911 Saves Act and what happened last week, as Laurie mentioned, last week it did go in front of a committee for education and workforce development, and that committee amended the language, and that amended language changes the bill and its original text from effectively demanding by Congress that OMB direct the change in the classification of 911 professionals to protected services or protective service, to, in the amended language, directs I think it actually says that they should ask, or they consider is the actual word, that they reclassify 911 professionals as protected service. So what does that mean? That means, in my opinion, and I think the opinion of many, many people, that this is the death nail to a legislative solution to reclassification. If you look at it from the perspective of, this is the committee that is going to make this recommendation, it sent it out of committee and to the House floor for approval, it changed it from demanding that they do it to consider asking BLS SOC to do it. Well, here's a newsflash, folks. BLS SOC already has the ability to do it. And so this, if 911 Saves Act does pass the way it is today in the amended version, it's not going to change anything. So as Tina just put in here, the onus remains on us as an industry to prove that we need to be changed and that the change is of merit to the moving us to protective service from the administration.
Well, and I'd like to sort of like build on that a little bit, Ty, because, when I saw this, I had, there's two questions that, came to my mind, which the first one is as OMB considers reclassifying telecommunicators, what do you think they're going to look at? My guess is they're going to look at the BLS SOC and the data, the evidence, the nocturnal bats that we have provided to them in order to make that happen. And the second thing is, even if telecommunicators are not reclassified, OMB is required to submit an explanation to Congress within 60 days. Well, what do you think that explanation is going to say? This all sort of like points right back to the BLS SOC as the means for 911 professionals to do what is necessary to get themselves reclassified. And if I can take it, if I go ahead, Ty.
No, I was going to just jump in and say, James has a great comment here, and there is, as I mentioned earlier, there is a Senate bill that kind of talks about this as well. And even if the 911 Saves Act would get out of the House and go over to the Senate, it would have to go through committee again. It would have to be then approved and sent to the floor. And then if they had made any modifications and changes to it, it would have to go to a conference committee between both houses and be reconciled again before it would be then voted on a third time before it could go to the president for signature. And so when you consider all of the steps that potentially have to happen between now and the end of this year, before Congress is done, it's a struggle. It's a struggle to be able to get there and get that done, because not to say that this is not important, because it is incredibly important. And it's incredibly important to all of us because this is a part of our job. It's incredibly important to our part of our job. But there are other things in the world that need to be done too, like defense spending and a budget for the United States and a whole host of other legislative things. It's not like the 911 Saves Act is the only thing that is in front of Congress today as well. So I think we have to understand that, in the grand scheme of things, we have to be cognizant that we can't rely on a legislative solution to a problem that we already know the answer how to fix. And the answer is update job descriptions, make sure that their training and certifications are reflected in it. We talk about technology and we add all of those key components. It's the stuff that we've been talking about for the last 45 minutes. That's the only way. The one and only surefire, guaranteed way to get it done is if we just all do the hard work that needs to get done. And that's why we're here. And hopefully, we can get everybody engaged and involved in getting that done over the next few months.
And that's the good news and the bad news, right, Ty? The bad news is we have work to do. The good news is it's our work
we know
exactly
what to do. Right.
I'm going to just like clarify a little bit here, because if you notice in that slide, it says the Office of Management and Budget, makes the decision. Well, like, how did they get into this conversation? Because they're not part of the Department of Labor, are they? Well, if you go to the next slide, it's a little bit fuzzy, and I apologize, but you can see where the Department of Labor is down on the bottom there. The Office of Management and Budget is not one of the 15 executive departments. But it's the largest component of the executive office of the president. There are others you can see there: the National Security Council, Office of National Drug Control Policy at DCP, and there are others. But the position of the director of OMB reports directly to the president, just like the secretaries of those 15 departments. So it's a cabinet rank position. And the OMB is primarily responsible for the SOC. They require federal agencies to use the SOC when publishing occupational statistics. And they make the final decisions about the SOC and what gets published in that SOC manual every 8 or 10 years. They also charter the policy committee, which is the group of people who, is charged with going through, not going through, but certainly, evaluating all of the feedback they've received in order to make that final determination. So, going back to what we said before, this is all sort of pointing back to what is going on with the BLS SOC. And I'm going to turn it over to Sara to talk a little bit about that.
Okay, so the reason we've kind of upped the urgency of these presentations is because this process is starting now. Yes, if you remember back in 2018 is when we were kind of disappointed in the decision. And if you do 8 to 10 years out, it's 2028, 2026, 2028. But they are starting the process now, and here is the proof. Now you can go to this website and check it out for yourself and click on all of these links. But they are asking for input right now, which I believe is due like August 12th. This is just the start of the process. But before we get all excited and start writing our letters, I want to just take a quick look at exactly what they are asking for. And again, it is not anecdotal evidence or stories. It is information, it is data, it is nocturnal bats. So this is part of what Laurie read at the very beginning, but it's worth looking at a little more closely. And considering recommendations for the 2028 revision, especially recommendations for new occupations, the SOC Policy Committee needs information to help evaluate recommendations in light of the classification principles and coding guidelines. They have guidelines that they have to follow. They cannot step outside of. And also, one point we didn't make yet is, Laurie, is there any precedent for Congress telling the BLS SOC what to classify and how?
Well, I mean, that sort of, raises a whole hornet's nest of things. It's like, well, why is 911 the exception to what every other classification in the system has to comply with? I mean, I'm a good example. I was a practicing nurse for 25 years before I got into 911, and that's one of the other professions that has to meet the criteria of the BLS SOC in order for its classification. So, like, I don't know, that it's a question that I have, but
something to consider. Okay, so if you are interested in joining this particular process and submitting comments, again, comments that reflect these principles and guidelines are likely to be more pertinent to the SOC Policies Committee's deliberations. Provide specific and detailed information and documentation that addresses these. So they give us guidelines. This is a document that if you go to the website, you can click on and read this. But there's 10 things. Title, occupational title, so we need to not be clerical in our titles, remember. Nature of the work performed, relationship to other SOC occupations, job titles, indication of number of workers in the occupation, types of employees, education and training, licensing, certifications, tools and techniques, professional or trade associations, and unions. So those are the specific things they are asking for in this revision.
Yeah, usually what they do is they look for information on how to alter the criteria that they use for all the classifications, and then they go through the process of collecting data from every occupation in order to figure out how it classifies itself. And so we're in the beginning of that process. My guess, and it's a guess on my part, is that they will begin collecting data from all the occupations sometime next year. So we've got a little bit of time. We've got a little bit of time to, sort of do what we can in order to make sure that our ducks are in a row. So when they come to us, the job descriptions and the other documentation and, for certification and technology actually reflects the job that telecommunicators do.
Okay, we only have 5 minutes left, but I want to address a question here that James had, because I think this is a good example. So awards for actions taken during a shift, such as life-saving awards or instructions providing childbirth instructions, instead of talking about the awards for saving a life, perhaps consider giving CPR instructions, giving birthing instructions. Those are part of the job and the actual data and the responsibilities of the job that is done. So that's how to kind of flip that into something that is less, I like swimming, more into bats are nocturnal.
The other thing that I would just want to throw in, because I know there are people listening or on this webinar who are not necessarily in positions of authority. And, you may be thinking to yourself, I'm not the person who's responsible for changing the job description in my center. Well, I get that. But maybe you're one of the people who steps forward to volunteer to put a group together to do that. It's not that there's nothing you can do about it. You can step forward and you can volunteer to be part of a group that gets this done.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more, Laurie. I think that one, and I think Sara, you mentioned it earlier, we have to be better advocates for our own self and our own industry, right? And so you may not be in a position of power to actually say, let's get this done. But each of you, no matter where you are in your organization, at whatever level you are a leader, and you have the power and you have the capacity to be an advocate for change within your own agency and our industry. And so that's what you need to do. And we all know what it is that it lies ahead. We all know exactly what it takes to get this done. And so you are a leader. You right on, Tina. Everyone is a leader in every seat. You have skin in this game. And so if you aren't being an advocate, if you're on this webinar and your boss or your boss's boss is not on this webinar, then you have skin in this game, because you are the one who's now got to go to them and say, what are we doing? I was on this webinar. I learned about this. I know what the process means. We haven't done this. What can I do to help? Or what steps are we taking to ensure that we get this done for our agency so that we can be a part of the statistical amount that is required to see the change?
Sara, if you could go to the next slide, I think the picture sort of captures what we're trying to get across. It's time to stop waiting for the wizard.
Yep.
We've all
or
had the
magic
power
fairy
all along to make this happen.
Yeah, exactly. We it's not about the magic fairy or the man behind the curtain. I mean, in the picture earlier, we actually, Laurie on our way back from lunch yesterday actually walked by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. I mean, it's an actual place that actually exists. It's not some mythical thing. And they, as Sara said earlier, they have very specific guidelines that they are required by law to actually follow. So, sprinkling fairy dust from above or hoping that the man behind the curtain will pull all of the right strings to get a legislative answer is silliness. We control this. We can control what the answer is, but it requires people to do the damn work.
Well, and here's a question for you. In the 50 plus years that 911 has existed, when have we ever left the really important stuff to somebody else?
That's a good point, Laurie. That's a really good point.
Just saying.
Not who we are. And I think sometimes people tend to shy away from things that they don't understand. So hopefully this webinar has broken down this process so you understand how all of these things are related and that you really can make a difference and you really can step up. And this is your call to action to step into that leadership position that you've always had. You've always had the courage. You've always had the heart. So let's do this.
Got to get it done. So if you want to know more, you want to know more about how to do it, we're going to break it down in 2 weeks on the 31st. And we're going to really kind of dive in to how to break that down. What's it really going to be like? What do we need to make sure that we put into those job descriptions? We're going to break that down. We're going to make sure that we talk about the certifications and training and ways to incorporate the technology aspects into your job descriptions so that it meets all of the 3 components that we need to help BLS SOC do their job and see that there actually is a change, right? We know that there's been a change. Now we got to reflect it. And part 2 on the 31st is where you're going to find it. So please join us.
You can catch us there. You know how to reach us, and we will see you in a couple of weeks. Thank you all so much for your time.